Good afternoon, everyone. Please allow me to extend a welcome to each and every one of you to this special online masterclass series that we have in our second session today. And we are going to be exploring the digital retail consumer with our very special guest that is going to teach us about the retail consumer today, which is Dr. Simona Pillay. Please allow me to introduce you to Dr. Simona Pillay. She is a lecturer in the Department of Marketing Management at UJ. She is renowned as one of the most progressive researchers in Africa. Her passion lies at the intersection of marketing and retailing. So throughout her academic career at UJ, which spans a period of 9 years, she has made significant strides in helping to reshape and redefine the landscape of retail education. She's a dedicated educator, and therefore she has transformed the Diploma in Retail Business Management program, not only changing students' perceptions of retailing, but also enhancing the program to improve graduate success and employability. Dr. Pillay's expertise extends to the fields of marketing communications, digital marketing, and consumer behavior. So together with her wealth of academic experience and dedication to student development, she is also the W.R. Seater Leadership Chair at the University of Johannesburg. She aims to navigate collaborative opportunities anchored in knowledge creation, and she tries to chart a course towards a future where every student's potential is not just realized, but celebrated. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Pillay.
Thank you so much, Dr. Stradum. That was a rather long introduction, and sometimes I forget things that I've done or bios that have been written. So I'm very humbled that all of that information was included and shared. And good evening to everyone on the masterclass today. I'm going to share my screen and jump into it because I have quite a lot to share. If you can just confirm that you can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
All right. So I'm quite enthusiastic and passionate about this particular topic because this is kind of what my PhD was centered on. And there were some interesting insights that came from the findings that I wanted to bring into this presentation, which differs from what we traditionally know about the digital consumer, and especially within a retail context. So I want you to just take a moment to think about the last online shopping experience that you had. And think about the journey that you went through, the decisions that you made, the amount of money you spent, perhaps which type of products you evaluated. And just keep that at the back of your mind as we go through this presentation. My assumption is that most of the participants online have indeed shopped online, and so you can relate and resonate to some of the information that's going to be shared. So, with this in mind, we need to be quite cognizant of the fact that consumer behavior has definitely transformed. And I mean, that's not a surprise. That's quite an obvious. And everyone talks about how COVID initiated the shift, or rather expedited the shift. And we heard from yesterday's masterclass how many technologies were implemented and how retailers had to adapt. But from a consumer perspective, there were a lot of minor shifts and also major shifts that happened that influenced how they shopped online. And this essentially determined the way they made decisions online. So it really forced retailers to deep dive into understanding consumers and catering to their needs. So, by definition, digital consumer behavior is basically about how consumers behave online, but also how they interact with brands and retailers that combines various channels and platforms like social media, websites, how they browse online, and it also refers to the devices that they use to search online. these all influence the behavior from a very large and broad overview perspective of digital consumer behavior. So I want to pose a quote to you, and this is from Brian Chesky, the CEO of Airbnb. And in the previous slide here, we spoke about devices. And here he says, technology is not just a tool, it's the foundation of modern customer experience. And when we talk about technology, it's a combination of your hardware, so the actual devices that you connect with, as well as the software, which would be your apps and platforms that you engage with. And from a customer experience point of view, we hear this a lot in retail. We heard it in yesterday's masterclass. We read about it online. There are a lot of academic articles on customer experience, but it seems like a term that's just kind of thrown around without any true understanding of the customer's viewpoint. So, to reiterate, in order to understand or deliver the correct customer experience, we have to understand digital behavior. And traditionally, consumer behavior was all about understanding what consumers buy, with a little bit of emphasis on how they make their purchases. But now, the why, when, and how are becoming more and more important, especially in an online context. So I put two examples up here on screen. Mr. D, for example, they are quite good at understanding when exactly to promote to customers. So if any of you are subscribed to Mr. D or use Mr. D, you just take note of when exactly they communicate with you, whether it's via email or SMS or through social media or notifications. It's usually around lunchtime or dinner time, or if it's on a weekend. And for example, I don't like cooking on a weekend, I prefer to get Mr. D. If there's a possibility that I haven't ordered Mr. D on the weekend, I will immediately get an email saying something about a special or promotion or a discount for some of my favorite restaurants. And the same goes for Takealot. So they've analyzed consumer behavior in a way that towards the end of the month, they start promoting a lot more and have a lot more deals because they know that's when customers are getting paid. So it's all these minor things that we really need to consider that go above and beyond traditional consumer behavior factors like attitude, purchase intention, perception, learning. All of those stuff underpin this, but it's really about understanding how this behavior has evolved and shifted. So in terms of customer experience, I think retailers have to look at, firstly, understanding consumer behavior and understanding the consumer itself, which we will go through in a minute. And then also looking at how exactly customer experience can benefit them. And on screen, you'll see quite a few ways that customers, or rather retailers, can reap some type of return on investment through proper emphasis on customer experience. And as we've now heard, that can only really be developed with a true deep understanding of the digital consumer. So, who is the digital consumer? By definition, digital consumers are individuals who regularly use the internet to facilitate their decision-making process, whether it means they use the internet to directly shop or they use it to search for information in order to inform a purchase decision. These are digital consumers. So the definition is quite broad and encompasses many different facets. But just some of the characteristics that I want to share with you of a typical digital consumer. They are generally very well informed because they have access to so much information, whether it's on social media, websites, blogs, vlogs, emails. They have a lot of information. And now we have platforms like AI, ChatGPT, Copilot, where they can get information from. Because they have access to so much of this information, they are very quick at seeking this information. So they want information that's available to them in short pieces and snippets that they can easily and quickly make a decision because they value convenience. They also share and consume a lot of content, which we know. So you might find that some of them are influencers or follow influencers of certain products and retail brands. And they are influenced by these opinion leaders. They generally have low brand loyalty. And if we relate this back to perhaps the younger millennial generation and Generation Z, these are the consumers that want value for money and are willing to switch between brands where they perceive more value. As such, they are impatient and demanding because they have access to this information. So they're not so concerned about marketers telling them what the product can do. They can find that information out on their own. Rather, they want to see the results of a particular skincare product, or they want the human authentic experience shared by influencers online in order to access or influence their decision making. They value personalization, especially in a world where there is mass marketing, mass media. There's so much clutter when it comes to marketing and advertising that they want communication that speaks to them directly. So that's why you'll notice on your emails from Takealot, it will say, "Hi, Simona." And that's a way of trying to personalize it. But it goes beyond that. It's if it's saying, "Hey, Simona, here are some of our Mr. D specials." I would appreciate if those specials are from restaurants that I regularly purchase from, not from restaurants that I wouldn't purchase from. So personalization and technology, AI, all of that go hand in hand as we spoke about yesterday. They are very tech dependent, which I think is pretty self-explanatory. They're also critically minded because they have access to this information, because information is coming from everywhere. You'll have people that are really vouching for a particular retail brand and some that are not. So they kind of make decisions and their decisions are informed by a lot of depth and research and analysis. They are not easily persuaded by just one marketing campaign. They would really go and explore and experience what different consumers are saying. And they're also quite curious to open to new experiences, which I think is quite a benefit for retail marketers, especially. And this means that their campaigns are getting a lot more interesting, they're getting a lot more impactful. We talk about eco-friendly products, sustainability. These are key concepts and trends that are coming up now beyond just technology-related constructs that are shaping digital consumers. So, as a retailer, we need to ask ourselves, how do we cater to these digital consumers based on their characteristics? And I know Checker 60 is used a lot in many case studies, but there's a reason why. And I thought just bringing it into this discussion would show you how well they've done in promoting and understanding the digital consumer. So I've just put on screen a couple of different ways that they promote. So they have an omni-channel strategy, which we'll discuss a little bit later on, but we tapped into that yesterday. So they communicate with you on WhatsApp. If you haven't purchased from Checker 60 in a couple of days, they'll send you reminders or they'll send you specials that you can tap into. They also have what they call push notifications. So if your notifications are on, you'll know if your delivery has been shopped, if things are being ordered, if products are not available. You'll know where your driver is. It's all tracked and presented through push notifications. So we're really trying to target those consumer characteristics that I mentioned of personalized convenience. They're demanding, so they want things now. They've also partnered with Vitality. So those of us that have medical aid through Discovery and we've got Vitality, they're capitalizing on these partnerships because it really brings them advantages and it expands their consumer base. I think Woolies also had a partnership with Vitality, or if it's Pick n Pay, I can't remember. But because of the growth and because of the demand for products at Checker 60 or through Checker 60, um, they were managed to secure this partnership with Vitality. So this is offering a number of benefits that target specific digital consumer needs. Things like convenience, being well informed, personalization, all of that we spoke about. There's also a lot of influencers. If you go to TikTok or YouTube, you'll find influencers speaking about their Checker 6060 experience. And this, which I found quite interesting, that I saw recently on social media, I know it's rather small, but I mean, Checker 60 is so popular that kids are even having Checker 60 themed birthday parties. So you can see how they've managed to identify their digital consumer needs and cater to all those needs through these various modalities. So types of digital consumers, this is just a bit of theory. I'm not going to go through it specifically, but you'll find that depending on the type of products as well that are being purchased, consumers will fit into different categories. So if I take myself, for example, I'm a Checker 60 fan. I will forever be on Checker 60. So I am digitally driven and an eternal shopper in that sense. I could also be a retail scout and an ambassador the way I shop on Checker 60. But then you might have people that use the internet to find information, to compare alternatives, but they don't necessarily make the purchase online. And these would be people that fall into the calculated shoppers and basic digital consumer categories. So that's just a little bit of theory, but I want to move on to more of the juicy bits. So we touched on this concept of showrooming yesterday, and this also alludes to the types of digital consumers and how they buy. So even though I might be an avid Checker 60 eternal shopper, if I was buying a more high involvement product, like let's say a perfume online, I would take a little bit more time and perhaps wouldn't shop online, but I would definitely browse online. So I would do a little bit of web rooming and then go into the store because I want the tactile experience of smelling the perfume and using it. Or it can work the opposite way, where customers will go and browse in store, but they will buy online. And retailers have understood this behavior. And depending on what their objectives are, they will then decide where and how to promote. So if they're finding that customers are browsing a lot online, but buying in store, if they want to promote more traffic to their online website or app, they would then offer promotions on the app. So if you purchase on the app, you can get free shipping for your first delivery. Whereas if customers are buying online and not in store, and retailers want to drive traffic in store, then they'll have specific in-store promotions. So Leroy Merlin is a good example of this. They have a lot of online only products available. So you are most likely to purchase that product online and receive the discount online as opposed to in store. And it's all these nuances that are rightly investigated and explored when we try and understand consumer behavior, and that's embedded in research. And consumer behavior is constantly changing. Just as technology is growing and changing, so are the shifts in consumer behavior. So some of the examples that I've put here are how retailers apply this web rooming versus showrooming strategy. And again, it depends on the objective of that particular retailer. But Checker 60 here, what they do to combat showrooming is they combine fast delivery with in-app promotions. So it reduces the need for you to go and compare prices on other apps or through other stores. Tacky Town encourages web rooming. So they offer in-store pickups after online browsing. Lots of people like to look at shoes online, and they might then offer a discount if you come to the store to purchase your shoes. Clicks is another example who actually blends both web rooming and showrooming, and they promote products online Your loyalty points, your Clicks Club card points, you can earn through both channels, whether you shop online or if you shop in the store. And then they have omni-channel platforms like an in-store pharmacist who can give you advice, but Clicks and Dis-Chem also have virtual consultations as well. So what I've put on screen here to sum up the typical digital consumer persona, and this is based on research that I pulled from my PhD, I put together the stats that I found at the time on a typical digital consumer persona. And based on different reports and different insights that were drawn, I found that typically your digital consumer persona, it could be male or female, but the reports that I saw alluded to females being more apt or more willing to shop online. Sorry, so these are much younger people who are willing to shop online. They are starting off in their first jobs, or perhaps they are students and they have part-time jobs, and they're really looking for convenience, for being connected, and for keeping abreast of trends. But they do have some frustrations, which we'll delve into a bit later. Things like scams, cybercrime, needing a card to shop online. There's a lack of trust because of all the cybercrime that's been taking place. And sometimes there are poor online shopping experiences on certain sites because they haven't identified the needs of the digital consumer. So what does she do online? Typically, you'll see that searching is quite high. Visiting online stores is actually higher. Shopping online is a bit lower than searching and visiting the online store. And sharing recommendations is a little bit less in terms of the behavior that's applied, but she does depend on these reviews to make her purchase. Technology used, so because here it was a marketing assistant, she's always on social media and connected via social media apps or mobile apps. And stores that were the top online retailers were Takealot, Superbalist, and Checker 60. And that I've classified according to this persona. So it's really important that we, I think, as retailers and retailing students, understand the consumer at their depth and their essence. So this is a very brief summary of that persona with all the characteristics. But really, we want to understand what are their motivations, what are their frustrations or pain points, and which platforms are they accessible on? And then we can start designing customer experience strategies to either capitalize on these motivations or mitigate some of the pain points that they experience. And so what does all of this mean? All right, we've understood the digital consumer, we've understood their characteristics, we've developed somewhat of a consumer persona. But what does this all mean for retailers? Retailers need to understand the decision-making process. So if any of you have done consumer behavior in the session, you will know the typical 5-stage consumer decision-making process, which from a traditional consumer decision-making point of view makes sense. So we'll see that a need recognition is ignited, meaning it's 12 o'clock, I'm hungry, I'm feeling for something to eat, I don't have anything in my fridge. And so my first thing is to go onto Mr. D or Uber Eats, where I go and search for available restaurants. I compare alternatives. So I look at restaurants that I enjoy. I look at prices. I look at promotions. I look at discounts. And then I decide I want to purchase from, let's say, KFC. I make that purchase and then I evaluate that by providing them with a rating or reviewing or just feeling satisfied with the meal. That's all well and good, and it's a very basic outline of how consumers move through this process. But what we need to understand is where exactly do we find consumers? So what I put up on screen here is Google's I want to moments. So it's kind of aligned with the consumer decision-making process where it starts with I want to know. So this is where customers are searching for information and the stats are here on screen. Once they've searched for information, then they look at I want to go. So where exactly do they want to shop from? Or it could be the physical location, or it could be the choice of store. What exactly do they want to do? So this is based on content that's available. Do they want to read reviews? Do they want to access certain information that's going to help them make a decision? And then I want to buy. And this is where ultimately we want to drive our customers to as retailers. So here you'll see it says 82% of smartphone users consult their phones while in the store deciding what to buy. So we need to ask ourselves, given all of these stats, what can we do to promote online shopping if that's our main objective? Or if we want them to come to the brick and mortar store, remember, a digital consumer will still shop in a brick and mortar store, but their characteristics are quite different. So the fact that they use or consult their phones in the store, what does this mean for us? What information can we derive from this insight in order to develop the right strategies? So, in line with those 5 decision-making stages that I spoke about, this was basically the gaps that I identified in my study that led me to wonder if this 5-stage consumer decision-making model is actually relevant in the context of digital consumers. So, what I found was that existing online CDM is consumer decision-making models generally apply to developed markets. In emerging markets, we have many issues, socioeconomic issues, and the kind of context I set my study in was having access to data to access the internet. Because of infrastructure, because of location, whether you live in suburban, metropolitan, rural areas, your access to data and the internet might vary, which impacts how you shop online. Secondly, it depends what type of purchases you're making online. So, low involvement purchases are things like groceries. We don't put much thought and effort into it. Whereas high involvement purchases could be things that we spend more time considering, whether it's looking for accommodation or looking at flights, booking flight tickets online. Those are more high involvement purchases. And the way we make decisions based on the different types of purchases are going to be different. So if I know that I'm ordering the same Sasko Sam bread from Checker 60 every week, I just know that's my go-to. I don't have to compare alternatives. I don't have to look at other information. I don't have to look at competing products. Whereas if I'm trying to book a flight to Bali, then I'm going to spend time comparing the different airline costs and how to make that decision. So that was one of the reasons for undertaking a study of this nature. Most existing consumer decision-making models assume that the process is linear, meaning we start at need recognition, we move to information search, etc., etc. It doesn't factor in that this process in an online context or from a digital consumer context can actually be non-linear, and we can move through various stages either simultaneously or we can move back and forth. And then a lot of the models that were developed were more than 5 years ago. So this was probably during COVID, before COVID, and we know that since COVID, a lot of changes and shifts have been made. So just to take you back to the first reflection point, reflecting on your decision-making process online, I would assume that if I go back here, this outlines the broad categories that you probably or the broad stages that you probably do undergo when shopping online. But if you actually sit and think about it, there is a lot more that happens. And after doing a couple of focus groups, this is what I found. So we can see here that it's indeed way more than 5 stages. I'm not going to go through all of it. You'll have a look here and see that there's different color lines and blocks and the thickness all varies. And that was basically to denote which decision-making processes or stages factor in high involvement or low involvement, which factors in those that have access or sufficient access to the internet versus those that struggle with having data to make online purchases. And you can see that it's definitely non-linear. This is in an emerging market context, so there are a number of socioeconomic factors to consider. There are additional stages that we go through. So sometimes people log into an app, other times they log into the website. They all search for information. Reading reviews was quite important, especially for high involvement purchases. Comparing these alternatives were important. Risk deliberation, which is not so directly spoken about in the traditional process, but because of cybercrime, scams, all of that, they look at, can they actually trust their online purchase? Then they have a purchase intention. They check out. A lot of them will track their delivery, and then they'll consume the product. And that will lead to some post-purchase evaluation that's happening here. But as you see at the top here, a lot of them reinforce that their decision-making process actually starts with awareness before need recognition. And that, for me, is the actual process that digital consumers undergo when shopping online. So why is this all important to know? As retailers, understanding the customer journey is important to document specific customer touch points. And touch points is literally where you as a retail brand access the customer. So, my apologies, I went through too fast there. So this is just an example to show you, and here are some of the decision-making stages right at the top. There are 5 here. I mean, if you use the model that I presented, this would be a little bit over complex. But essentially, it's looking at the same broad categories. But what it's doing is it's going beyond just the category. It's also looking at motivations. It's looking at the action that the consumer performs. So this example is someone that's looking to purchase a car online. It also looks at what consumers are thinking here in these speech bubbles. And this line here denotes their emotions, with the assumption that when it goes up, emotions are more positive, and when it goes down, emotions could be more negative. When we say negative, it means they could be confused, they could be hesitant to make the purchase, they could be overwhelmed with the amount of information. So you will be getting the slides and you can have a look at this example. But if we put it into context with Checker 60, okay, so this is a simplified version, not in graphic representation like the one I just showed you. But essentially, we plot our decision-making stages here at the top, and then we outline the depth to that particular digital consumer. So this digital consumer journey map follows the consumer persona that you've developed based on information that you've obtained and the research that you've done. So the touch points here are where the retailer can access the customers. So I'm just going to go through one, okay? So if we look at the awareness stage, the touch point here is the actual app. So you log into the app, you become aware of certain products that you want to purchase from Checker 60. Your initial thought is, there's no time to go grocery shopping this week. I have a very busy schedule, and you might feel overwhelmed as a customer. So what are your pain points at this point in time when you become aware of Checker 60? There's a lack of time to visit the store, but your motivation is a need for convenience. So the retailer will need to break down each of these stages that the customer goes through, analyze what are their thoughts, their emotions, their frustrations, and their motivations, and what are the touch points that they can reach the customer on to effectively cater to their needs. Remember, this information all comes from in-depth research in understanding the customer journey. So part of your touch points could also be the way you market to digital consumers. And we know anything online, whether it's social, mobile, email marketing, influencer marketing, these are the platforms that digital consumers are using. And this is how we connect with them. What's also becoming popular is this idea of omni-channel. And I know yesterday Rasi touched on omni-channel as well, but the demand for omni-channel experiences has grown exponentially, especially with these same-day delivery apps, Checker 60, Pick and Pay ASAP, Woolies Dash, because of the convenience that it offers to customers. So a lot of the retailers want to kind of be in this space because this is where digital consumers feel the most integrated with their purchases, or rather, they want purchases that are integrated with their lifestyle. So traditional was your physical store, e-commerce, shopping online. Multi-channel is where there are different channels that you can shop from, either online or in store. Whereas omni-channel is where we integrate various channels like web rooming or showrooming, or we make it as convenient as possible for that consumer. So if we look at Checker 60's omni-channel strategies, their key strategies are that they are mobile-first convenience. So you access it most conveniently on your mobile device. And they've got these push notifications, which I spoke about. You can track your delivery. If products are out of stock, you can choose your alternate products or substitute products, and this is done via your mobile device. Real-time fulfillment and tracking, everything happens in live time. So if your notifications are on, you have access to tracking that purchase as if you were actually in the store. So channels, mobile app, your GPS or location needs to be on in certain cases, or they can update you via SMS. Integration with physical stores. So this is product availability dependent. So certain stores might have access to certain products and other stores not so much, but they ensure that they inform you if they do have availability of the product or not. Cross-channel customer support. So they have email, they contact you on email, they contact you on SMS, they contact you on WhatsApp. If your delivery is late, they send an apology. If they weren't able to provide you with the products you need, that money is refunded into your wallet that you can use for future purchases. So in terms of support, they are accessible via their apps, social media, and over the phone. Personalization and loyalty. So they introduced their extra savings Checkers card, which has allowed for a lot more promotions to be accessible. And then they've also partnered with Discovery Vitality, which adds to that level of personalization. And that's basically it for this presentation. I know it was pretty fast, but I thank you for your time, and I hope that we can open up the floor for questions and answers.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pillay, for really this very insightful presentation. Thank you so much for unpacking the complex world of the digital retailer to us. And I think I'm one of the more older generation, maybe in the audience, but I think I realized based on your discussion and your example of Checker 6060, I'm also a Checker 6060 fan. So maybe COVID has also played a role in converting some of us old folk into becoming also a little bit of a digital retail consumer. So yes, I just want to encourage again for anybody who might have any questions or any comments, please use the Q&A functionality in the dashboard to post your questions if you have any questions or any comments to Dr. Pillay. We really would like to hear from you guys and have a nice, robust conversation. There's a comment from Andre Groves. He says the 5 steps for decision making. We could offer free Wi-Fi for ease of access, stock levels, alternatives, rate the purchase experience, the NPS. What is your thoughts maybe on that, Dr. Pillay?
Thanks for that, Andre. I agree with you. So in my write-up of findings and recommendations, I did include quite a number of recommendations for online retailers, and one of them was access to Wi-Fi. I know that from the study that I conducted, majority of customers in rural areas said that their decision-making journey is negatively impacted because of limited access to data. But I also know that since then, the government has rolled out, through Vumatel, if I'm not mistaken, they have rolled out a strategy to try and get fiber into rural areas so that there is accessibility and people are not disadvantaged and that they can shop online. So I do think it's a good recommendation. Thank you for that. I see Karika, I would just like to know, do you think that within a platform like Checkers 60, you can also have higher low involvement purchase? So, what I discovered after doing the focus groups is that everyone's perceptions about high and low involvement purchases are very, very subjective. And this is something that's not really covered in traditional consumer behavior and traditional consumer behavior textbooks. In the textbook, it will say high involvement is this, low involvement is that. But I could be a first time Checkers 60 shopper. And for me, that's high involvement because it's the first time I'm shopping on the platform. So it's going to take me a while to understand how to use it, to include all my personal details. My level of trust is probably going to be quite low because it's the first time I'm using it, and there's going to be risks that I might be thinking of. Whereas an average Checker 60 shopper would probably look at it as a low involvement purchase. And that's something that I argued in my study, was that it's not so much about the product, but it's about perceptions of the purchase. Because if we look at jewelry, if we look at perfume, if we look at houses, if we look at cars, those are all products that are classified as high involvement products. But the purchasing process of that differs. So the purchasing process is what's subjective. And myself and one of my supervisors actually wrote a conference paper on deciphering between high involvement and low involvement product versus purchase. So I'm happy to share that with you offline if you'd like. Thank you for that.
Are there any other questions or comments from the audience? Please feel free to ask your question. Use this opportunity now. You have Dr. Pillay here. Use the opportunity. Any comments? Dr.
I'm
Pillay,
also happy to, sorry, Dr. Strader. I'm also happy to revise any of the slides in case I moved a little bit too fast. If anyone would like me to revise, because we have a couple of minutes left, you can just let us know in the Q&A.
Dr. Pillay, I actually want to, I think it's really amazing. I found the model that you showed depicting the online consumer decision-making process very, very interesting. Just again, to reiterate the complexity of what we considered the 5 steps in the decision-making process, and, to what it has actually evolved into.
Yes.
And I actually think that even maybe again for me, that might be from the older generation, I've also moved on from just that 5 steps because again, like the quote you said, technology is not just a tool, it's the foundation of the modern consumer experience, that it's very difficult for us to really engage with retailers today without having that digital engagement as well.
100%. And I mean, this was a qualitative study, so this by no means was tested quantitatively, although the idea is to go on and test it that way. So it was quite interesting for me that so many stages actually came up during the focus groups. And, we made sure that we had quite a diverse sample, even though we can't really generalize these findings. But if you really sit and look at the process and think about all the steps that you take when shopping for either if it's a high involvement or a low involvement purchase, it's so nuanced and it's so in depth, and sometimes we don't even think about it. And that is where I think it's dangerous for retailers because they need to, through as much research as possible, understand what makes that consumer tick. And if, for example, consumers are spending a lot of time comparing alternatives on the platform, what can they do to take advantage of that? Or what can they do to speed up the process? Because ultimately, the main goal is to make a sale so that you can make a profit and there's some type of return on investment. So, looking at these stages, this was just from one study. There could be multiple other stages that come up later on, especially if we look at how omnichannel is working. And I think the back and forth with all of these arrows also depicts that omnichannel experience, that customers are using their devices, they're using their apps to make all of these decisions and to undergo all of these stages that ultimately lead them to make a purchase. So I would encourage anyone online today, before you shop online next time, really think about what's happening in your mind. Even if you've purchased that Sasko Sam bread 50 times from Checker 60 in the last couple of months, just think about what is driving the purchase. And that is the perspective that retailers need to come from, which is why I think that Checker 60 has done an amazing job because they've put themselves in the minds of consumers and they've really understood what it takes to go through this process. If we look at risk deliberation, for example, you'll find that many online retailers are now embedding these third party payment sites that are seen as credible and trustworthy. So, PayPal, Ozal, Snapper, Google Pay, Apple Pay, it's all embedded in your payment options. And that is to try and mitigate risk. Or even when it comes to pre-populating the fields for when you check out. That's all AI enabled. It's artificial intelligence. So I don't have to every time put in every line of my address or my cell phone number or my email address. And yes, it's convenient, it's efficient, but then you also get a handful of consumers that find that a little bit suspicious, or they get to the checkout stage where a lot of customers say, or a lot of the participants in the study said they all get here to the checkout stage, but a lot of them go back, especially if it's a high involvement purchase. Their products will sit in their cart and they will go back to compare alternatives or they'll go back to reading reviews. And I find myself doing this on platforms like Shein and Temu, where the products, you really need to investigate that you are purchasing a product that's the right size, that's the quality you're looking for. So I find myself having a cart of, let's say, 20 items, but I keep going back to reading the reviews, to searching for information, to looking for other alternatives that are available. I go and compare to what's available on Takealot because for me, Takealot is more trustworthy than Shein or Temu, but Shein and Temu are more there's more variety of products or they are cheaper than what Takealot can provide. So in my case, maybe I value price and I value variety. So I'm willing to wait those 15 days for my delivery to arrive as opposed to shopping from Takealot for a same day delivery or next day delivery purchase. So it's very complex and very complicated, and it's actually, I think, a way to maintain competitive advantage as a retailer if you can understand the customer and their journey to this extent, and to also tap into these emotions, thoughts, pain points, frustrations, because this is what is driving the customer to make the decision. It's not so much just the touch points. Where can we access the customer? It delves deeper into that. And this is where retailers should be investing their money in research, in understanding the customer, in having shoppers come in where you do interviews, you do focus groups, you track their consumer behavior and how they move on the app, on the store. And that's where I think Checkers 60 has benefited from. There has to be someone constantly tracking those metrics and looking at how long customers spend on a particular page. If we look at Temu, for example, I think the algorithm works similar to Netflix, if I'm not mistaken. So it will literally customize all searches based on what you are looking for. So if I'm having, or if I'm redecorating my house and I'm doing boho chic, then I'll be looking for boho chic decor. But everything else that comes up, whether it's a pair of shoes or whether it's jewelry, will all be boho chic themed. So it's these kind of algorithms that are put in place that technology enables us to look at what consumers are searching for and to personalize that journey for them as digital consumers. So, yeah, I think that was a very long comment or response to your comment, Dr. Stradom, but I hope that it clarified the complexity of that particular model.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Pillay. Really, it's very, very insightful. As you were talking, then things like pop in my mind, like even I think brand knowledge and brand trust might also come in that risk deliberation steps. And yes, it's very, very complex. Like you say, so many nuances to that, to all of us as human beings. We are not just a linear, we don't just exist in a linear context. So thank you very, very much. There's also been 2 other comments from attendees that's just saying thank you. It was very insightful for your discussion. Again, I just want to give a last opportunity if there's anybody who would like to comment or ask a question. We have 5 minutes still. If there's anybody who would like to comment or ask a question, please use the opportunity.
I really hope everyone has a better understanding and that the silence is not a sign of feeling overwhelmed or information overload. But like I mentioned, you will be receiving the recording and the slides if you've registered. So you can have access to it. You can also follow me on LinkedIn if you'd like, and we can connect there. And if you want to take this discussion further, then I'm more than happy to.
Thank you, Dr. Pillay. It doesn't seem like there are any urgent comments or further questions. So we can then, again, thank you so much for sharing your insights. It was really very interesting. And I think for all of us, retailers, students, future retailers of tomorrow, I think something that you really made clear to us is that we as consumers are complex. And I think with technology, probably things will get a little bit more complex. But definitely your examples also show us that retailers are adapting and they are part of this whole new digital world. So it makes it extremely exciting. I think it's an exciting time to be where we are at as retailers, as marketers, as consumers, and we are looking forward to see what the retail space is going to look like in the next 2 years, 3 years. So thank you again for sharing your insights. It was really a very fruitful interaction that we had.
Thank you so much, Dr. Stradom. I appreciate that. And thank you for the comments from our participants and for your attention. and you'll probably see me tomorrow as a host for our next session. So we are 3 minutes early, and I know it's heading into family time. So I would let everyone go, and we will catch up tomorrow. Thank you, everyone, and have a good night.
Thank you, Dr. Pillay. Good night, everyone.